Until 6 months ago, I was perfectly content with how my life was unfolding. At 62, I had long ago reconciled myself to living a quiet, predictable existence. The house where I had raised my children with Lisa, my wife who had passed away 6 years ago, was the same house I'd spent countless mornings sipping coffee at the kitchen table, reading the paper, and occasionally tending to the garden. I never minded the routine. In fact, it was something I had come to cherish. It was a calm life. My son Jason, the only child we had been gone for 2 years now, lost in a tragic accident on a rainy highway. I remember that day like it was yesterday, the cold feeling that took over when I first got the call. He was my pride, my only family left. After his death, I retreated further into my solitude, more comfortable in the quiet than with any other company. I still had a few friends, mostly old colleagues I played chess with now and then, and the occasional neighbor I helped with small tasks around the house. But there was no real connection, no deep conversation. Life had slowed down, and I had accepted that it was winding to a quiet end. Every day was the same, predictable in its rhythms. I would wake up at 6 a.m., get the coffee brewing, check the weather, and read the paper from cover to cover. Then, if the weather was nice, I would work outside, planting, trimming, or simply walking the yard. It wasn't much, but it was enough. There were nights I'd sit by the window, watching the light fade, waiting for the sound of footsteps, but it never came. Lisa was long gone, and Jason's absence left the house still and empty. Yet, somehow, I'd convinced myself that this was all there was for me, a life without excitement, without any changes. And I was okay with it. Or, at least, I told myself I was. There was a peace in routine, a certainty that at least I knew what to expect from each day. It wasn't that I didn't think about my son or my wife often. I did. I thought about them every day. Sometimes, in the quiet of the house, I'd hear their voices in my mind, or I'd catch a glimpse of them in the corners of rooms. The memories would rush back, painful and sweet all at once. But I didn't know what to do with the grief anymore. It had settled into me like an old coat, worn and faded. And so I lived on, marking the days by the simple rituals of life. I had accepted that this was my fate, and I had made peace with it. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon in May, everything changed. I had just sat down in my armchair, a chessboard laid out on the coffee table in front of me, when the phone rang. I almost didn't pick it up. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize. It was probably another sales pitch, some scam I didn't have time for. But something made me grab the receiver and lift it to my ear. What I heard next would change everything. "Mr. Roberts, this is Emily Sanders from Child and Family Services. I'm calling about your son, Jason Roberts." I froze, my chest tight. My son had died 2 years ago. What could they want with me now? The words Emily Sanders spoke next hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Mr. Roberts, I'm sorry for your loss, but did you know that Jason had a daughter?" For a moment, the room spun, and I couldn't seem to breathe. A daughter? What was she talking about? Jason had never mentioned any daughter. I had no idea that my son had a child. The shock felt like it was squeezing the life out of me. I struggled to collect myself enough to speak. "A daughter?" I asked, my voice trembling. It sounded like something from a dream, something that couldn't possibly be real. "Yes, sir. Her name is Mia. She's 11 years old," Emily continued, her voice steady but tinged with sympathy. "I have some paperwork here if you're interested. We can arrange a meeting." I blinked, trying to process the words, but they didn't make sense. 11 years old? How could this be possible? Mia had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Jason never spoke of her, never even mentioned the possibility of a child. I had spent years thinking I was the last Roberts, that my line had ended with my son. And now this? A granddaughter I didn't know existed? The idea was too much. "Why are you calling me now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It's been years. Why didn't anyone tell me about this before?" I could feel my heart racing in my chest as I waited for an answer. Emily paused for a moment, and I could almost hear her sorting through her words before she spoke again. "Well, Mr. Roberts, Mia's mother, Rachel, recently passed away. She was battling cancer for some time, and unfortunately, she had no other family. Mia's foster placement is temporary, and we've been trying to locate any family members. Rachel had asked us to reach out to you before her passing, but we didn't have any way to contact you until now." We were hoping you might be willing to meet her and possibly take her in as her guardian. I sat back in my chair, staring at the phone in disbelief. I had a granddaughter, a child I'd never met, never even known about. How could this happen? The world felt like it was spinning around me, and I couldn't get my bearings. This was my son's child, my only remaining family. But what was I supposed to do now? Could I be a grandfather to this girl? I had no experience, no idea what I was doing. I sat there in the silence for what felt like an eternity, trying to wrap my mind around everything. In the end, though, there was no real decision to make. Mia needed family, and for better or worse, that family was me. Yes, I heard myself say, my voice trembling but determined, I'll meet her. Emily gave me details about where and when to meet Mia. 3 days later, I found myself in my car, heading to a small, unfamiliar foster home on the outskirts of town. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my stomach tied in knots. What was I doing? I wasn't prepared for this, but this was my family, and I had to do something. When I arrived, Emily greeted me at the door, looking as tired as she had sounded on the phone. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I want to prepare you, though. Mia's been through a lot. She's a little withdrawn, understandably, and she might not open up right away." I nodded, unsure of what to say, but something in me felt resolute. I could do this. I had to. We walked down a narrow hallway, and I could hear the quiet murmur of a child's voice from one of the rooms. When we reached the door at the end of the hall, Emily knocked gently. "Mia?" she called softly. "I have someone here to meet you." And then the door opened. There, standing in the doorway, was a young girl, small for her age, with dark hair that fell in waves around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, but they seemed distant, like she was somewhere else in her mind. She looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I saw the pain and fear in her eyes. "This is Mr. Roberts," Emily said gently. "Mia, this is your grandfather." I stood there, stunned by the reality of the situation. It felt surreal, like I was in a dream I wasn't sure I was ready to wake up from. Mia didn't say anything. She simply looked at me, her eyes wide, before she quickly turned her gaze back to Emily, as if she were trying to find comfort in someone who at least understood her. I felt an overwhelming urge to speak, to somehow reassure her that I wasn't a stranger, but my voice caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what to say, how to make this moment less awkward. So I just smiled, though it felt stiff, forced, and unsure of its place in the room. "Hi, Mia," I finally said, my voice quiet but trying to sound friendly. "I'm your grandfather, Frank." She nodded slightly, but her eyes remained guarded, distant. I tried to think of something else to say, some way to break the silence, but nothing came to mind. I was a man who had spent most of his life working with numbers and designs, not emotions. And now, here I was, facing the unexpected and feeling like a complete fool for not knowing how to be a grandfather. Emily, sensing the tension, spoke up. "Mia, would you like to talk with Mr. Roberts for a few minutes? You can tell him about your day, or anything you'd like." Mia didn't respond right away. She glanced at me, then at Emily, and I could see the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Slowly, she stepped back, allowing Emily to enter the room, but she didn't invite me in. The silence between us hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, I stood there unsure of what to do. "Do you want to sit down?" I asked gently, as though talking to a stranger, which, in a way, she was to me. She gave a brief nod and turned, walking slowly into the room. I followed, unsure if I was crossing some invisible line by simply stepping in. The room was small, filled with drawings on the walls, colorful, vibrant works that seemed to tell stories of a world Mia wanted to escape to. It was a bittersweet reminder of the life she had lost, one she had only just begun to make her own. I looked around, trying to make sense of the silence, of the gap between us. Mia sat on the bed, still clutching a stuffed animal to her chest, her eyes focused on a drawing pad on her lap. I wondered what was going on inside her mind, what thoughts she was processing. But instead of pressing her to speak, I did what I knew best. I just sat there. I didn't want to push her. The quiet stretched on, but in it, I could almost feel the unspoken connection that was waiting to form. After a while, I broke the silence. "I never knew Jason had a daughter," I said quietly, not knowing what else to say. "He would have been so proud of you." The words felt hollow, but I meant them with every fiber of my being. Mia didn't look up. She didn't react at all, but I saw her shoulders stiffen slightly, and I could tell she was holding back her feelings. And I couldn't blame her. "It's okay," I added softly, trying to let her know she didn't need to speak right away. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm just glad to meet you, Mia." For the first time, she looked at me, her gaze searching, weighing me in some way I couldn't understand. "I don't know you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know about Dad?" The question hit me like a wave, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. I had spent so many years grieving my own loss that I hadn't considered how much pain Mia must have carried in silence. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself before speaking. "I was his dad," I said softly, my voice cracking slightly. "I loved him more than anything, and if he were here, he would have loved you too." Mia didn't respond, but I could see something in her eyes shift, a flicker of recognition. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for now, it was enough. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward silences and tentative steps. Mia's grief was so raw, so present in everything she did. She barely spoke, spending most of her time in her room, sketching or staring out the window. Every now and then, she would come down to eat, her eyes constantly shifting as if she was expecting something, perhaps some sign that things would feel normal again, though I didn't know how to provide that. I kept telling myself I needed to be patient, that she needed time. But time seemed to stretch on forever, and my heart ached every time I saw her sitting alone, her small figure hunched over her drawings, lost in a world I couldn't reach. I didn't know how to make her feel safe, how to show her that she wasn't alone, that I would be there for her. One evening, a week or so after she moved in, I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, flipping through a photo album. She didn't notice me at first, so I stood there quietly watching her, unsure if I should approach or just let her be. But something about the way she lingered on each photo caught my attention. She was searching for something, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had been ripped away too soon. Finally, she looked up and met my gaze. "This is me and Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper, as she held up a picture of a younger version of herself, with Rachel smiling beside her. I nodded, my heart heavy. "Your mom was a beautiful woman," I said, walking over to her and sitting beside her on the couch. "She loved you so much, Mia." Mia's eyes flickered with something, perhaps gratitude or maybe sadness, but then she quickly looked away, as if the words were too much to bear. I could see the weight of her grief in her eyes. It was a grief I couldn't fully understand, not in the same way she did, but I knew what it was like to lose someone you loved deeply. "Do you miss her?" I asked softly, carefully, unsure if I was pushing too far. She nodded, her voice breaking as she answered. "I miss her so much. She was everything." Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, as if ashamed of her emotions. But I understood. She was trying to hold herself together, to be strong in the face of everything that had happened. "I know," I said gently. "And it's okay to miss her. It's okay to feel sad. I miss Jason every day." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I wasn't sure if it was right to bring him up, but in that moment, I needed her to know that I understood what it meant to lose someone you loved so deeply. Mia looked at me, and for the first time since she arrived, there was a shift in her expression, a small but significant change. "I didn't know about you," she said quietly. "I didn't know I had a grandfather." I swallowed, the lump in my throat growing. "I didn't know about you either, Mia, but now I do, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you. I'll always be here." She didn't respond immediately, but I saw her hands tremble slightly as she clutched the photo album tighter. And then, for the first time, she rested her head on my shoulder. The gesture was small, tentative, but it felt like a breakthrough. It felt like she was starting to trust me. Just a little bit. "We'll get through this together," I whispered, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It was still early, still fragile, but for the first time I felt like we were on the same path, heading towards something that resembled healing. As the evening wore on, we sat together, not saying much, but sharing a quiet connection. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is all you need to start rebuilding what's been broken. The days began to blur together as Mia and I settled into a new routine, one that neither of us had asked for, but was starting to shape our lives in unexpected ways. Mia was still quiet, still lost in her own grief, but something had shifted after that evening on the couch. There was a new, unspoken understanding between us, a fragile bridge that had begun to form, and every day I found myself trying to build on it, brick by brick. I tried to give her space when she needed it, but I also made sure she knew I was there whenever she was ready to talk, or even when she wasn't. I cooked dinner most nights, trying my best to follow her preferences. She was vegetarian, like Rachel had been, and I had no idea how to cook without meat. The first few attempts were disastrous, burnt stir-fries, overcooked pasta, but Mia seemed to appreciate the effort, even when it didn't quite turn out as planned. "It's okay," she'd say, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's better than what Mom made, anyway." The humor in her voice, though dry and reserved, gave me a flicker of hope. It was like she was starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with me, and that gave me the strength to keep trying. I wasn't her father, and I never would be, but I could still be someone who cared about her, who was there for her when the world seemed too overwhelming. And that was a start. One Saturday morning, a few weeks after that conversation about Rachel, I was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, one of my few successes in cooking. I had learned quickly that Mia liked her pancakes thick, with blueberries mixed in, and I had become something of a pro at making them. As I set the plates on the table, Mia came down the stairs, her hair still messy from sleep. She looked at the stack of pancakes, then at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her face soften. "These look good," she said, hesitating for a moment before sitting down across from me. "I'm getting better," I said with a grin, hoping my teasing would lighten the mood. "Only took me 3 tries." She smiled, actually smiled. It was small, but it was there. I felt a lump in my throat at the sight. After all the silence, all the walls that had been between us, this little moment felt like a victory. We ate together in silence, and I took a few moments to watch her, how she slowly began to relax as she ate, how she picked at the blueberries with her fork, a sign that she was starting to find comfort in this strange new life. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I felt like she was beginning to trust me in ways that I couldn't quite explain. I wasn't pushing her to talk, and she wasn't pushing me away. That alone was progress. "Grandpa," she said after a while, breaking the quiet, "do you think my mom would have liked it here?" I wasn't expecting the question. It caught me off guard, and I had to swallow the lump in my throat before answering. "I think your mom would be happy you're here with me," I said softly. "She wanted what was best for you, Mia. She loved you very much." She nodded, and we lapsed into another quiet moment. I could tell she was thinking about her mom, about the life she had lost, and it broke my heart to think about it. But I couldn't change that. All I could do was be here, be present, and hope that over time, Mia would come to understand that even though things had changed, she wasn't alone. Later that afternoon, we went to the park. I had been meaning to take her there for a while, but I hadn't wanted to push her into anything she wasn't ready for. This time, Mia was the one who suggested it. She didn't say much, but I could tell she needed some space, some fresh air. We sat together on a bench, and I watched as she kicked a ball around, the same way Jason used to do when he was her age. It was bittersweet to see it, but it was also a sign that Mia was starting to find joy again, even in small things. I didn't know how long it would take for her to fully heal, to come to terms with everything she'd lost. I didn't even know if she would ever truly be okay. But in that moment, sitting on the bench, watching her play, I felt a deep sense of peace. We were on this journey together now, and that was enough for me. Whatever came next, we would face it together. A few months had passed since Mia and I had started this new chapter together. Our routine had become more familiar, though still fragile in many ways. I was learning, slowly, how to be a grandfather, how to offer support without overstepping, how to respect her space while still being present. And Mia, well, she was adjusting in her own way. She wasn't the same quiet, withdrawn girl she'd been when she first moved in, but she still carried that weight of grief, that sadness that clung to her in quiet moments. One Saturday morning, we were sitting at the kitchen table, eating the pancakes I'd gotten better at making. It had become our tradition, Saturday pancakes, just the two of us. I'd ask her about her week, and she'd answer in short bursts. But that was enough. Sometimes she'd even laugh at my attempts to joke, which felt like a small victory. This time, however, she was quiet as she pushed a pancake around her plate. "You okay?" I asked gently, setting my fork down and watching her. She looked up at me, her face serious, her eyes distant. For a moment, I thought she might say nothing, as she had so many times before when I'd asked her how she was feeling. But then she surprised me. "I've been thinking about Mom," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And about you." I waited, not wanting to interrupt. This was a rare moment when she was opening up, and I didn't want to ruin it with impatience or too many questions. "I know you're my grandpa," she continued, her fingers tracing a line on the edge of her plate. "But it feels weird sometimes, like I didn't even know you were there when I needed you. And now you're here, and I don't know how to make it feel normal." My heart clenched. It was as if she had taken all the words I didn't know how to say and put them into her own. I felt the weight of her grief in that moment, the confusion, the pain, the longing for the life she had lost. "I get it, Mia," I said quietly. "I didn't know about you. I didn't know you existed. But now I do. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, just like I would have been if I'd known. I know it's strange, and I know it feels like everything's upside down, but we're still family. That hasn't changed." She looked up at me then, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I'm trying," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I really am. But sometimes I don't know how to be okay." "I know," I replied softly, reaching across the table and placing my hand over hers. "You don't have to be okay all the time. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be here, and I'll be here with you. And when you're ready, we'll figure things out together." She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes, but this time she didn't look away. She didn't try to hide it. It was the first time in a long while that I saw her allow herself to feel, to admit that the weight of everything was still too much to carry alone. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk in the park. It had become a sort of tradition, though I never pushed her. This time, she spoke a little more, telling me about her art club at school, the people she was starting to connect with, even some of the silly things she'd been drawing. The small things, her art, her little victories, were still fragile, but they were there. She was growing, changing, piece by piece, and I could see it in the way she carried herself. As we walked, I thought about how far we'd come. I didn't know what the future held, and I didn't know if Mia would ever fully heal from the loss of her mother. But I also knew that, no matter how long it took, we would be okay. We had a long way to go, but we weren't alone anymore. And that, for now, was enough. It had been 6 months since Mia moved in with me, and the silence between us had slowly been replaced with something different, something that felt more like peace. We weren't perfect, and there were still days when Mia seemed lost in her thoughts, as though the weight of everything she had endured was too much to bear. But there were also moments, small, fleeting moments, when I saw the girl she was becoming. The girl who had just needed time, patience, and a little space to heal. That Saturday morning, like so many others, I was in the kitchen, making pancakes. I'd learned by now that Mia liked them fluffy and thick, with extra syrup on top. She came down the stairs, her hair still messy from sleep, but there was something different in the way she walked. Less weighed down, more present. She sat at the table, gave me a small but genuine smile, and picked up her fork without saying much. I could tell she was in a better mood, but I wasn't going to press her. We had come a long way, and I didn't want to risk pushing her back into the shell she had spent so many months in. "How was school this week?" I asked casually, trying to keep the conversation light. She shrugged, then looked up at me, her expression softening. "It was okay. I'm getting better at drawing. I think I'm going to try out for the art show." I paused, surprised. For the past few months, Mia had spent most of her time sketching quietly in her room, but I hadn't expected her to take the next step and put herself out there. "That's great," I said, my voice filled with pride. "I'd love to see what you're working on." Mia smiled again, this time more openly. "I'll show you when I finish it," she said, her eyes lighting up a little. It was the first time in a long while that I'd seen her excited about something other than the memories of her mother. It felt like a small victory. After breakfast, we decided to spend the day outside. The weather had been beautiful all week, and I suggested we go for a walk by the lake, a place we used to visit when Jason was younger. It was quiet there, peaceful, and I hoped it might offer a chance for Mia to clear her head. We walked side by side, the breeze rustling the leaves, and for a while, we didn't speak much. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was just comfortable. As we reached the end of the lake, Mia stopped and sat on a bench, staring out at the water. I could tell something was on her mind. I sat beside her, waiting. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, do you think Mom would be proud of me?" I wasn't sure what to say at first. The question caught me off guard, but it was one I had been expecting. Mia had spent so much time trying to keep her mother's memory alive, trying to hold on to the woman who had given her everything. I didn't know if I could answer in a way that would make it easier for her, but I knew I had to try. "I think she'd be incredibly proud of you," I said, my voice steady, though I felt the lump in my throat. "You've been so strong, Mia, and you're starting to find your way, even when it's hard." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I miss her so much," she whispered. I placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing it gently. "I know, sweetheart, I know, but you're not alone in this. You've got me, and I'm proud of you too." Mia leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder, and for a long moment, we just sat there, watching the water ripple in the breeze. It wasn't much, but in that moment, I felt like we had finally reached some kind of understanding, an unspoken agreement that we would face the future together, no matter how uncertain or painful it might be. It was then that I realized something. I wasn't just her grandfather. I was the one who had needed her more than I'd ever known. She had brought me back to life, in a way. I thought I had been the one doing the caregiving, but in truth, it was Mia who had helped me heal, who had reminded me that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward. We stayed by the lake for a while longer, but when we finally headed home, I felt lighter. We both did. The past was still there, but it no longer felt like it had to define us. Together, we were learning to build a future, one small step at a time. The months that followed felt like a slow, steady progress. Mia and I had built a routine, a life together that was different from what either of us had expected, but one that was starting to feel like home. I still had my moments of doubt, those fleeting moments when I questioned whether I was doing enough, whether I was the right person to be raising her. But then there were moments like this morning, when Mia came into the kitchen with a wide grin on her face, holding up a drawing she had been working on for the art show at school. "I finished it," she exclaimed, holding up the piece of paper, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I set the frying pan down and walked over to her, my heart swelling with pride. "Let me see," I said, eager to see what she had created. She handed it to me, her hands trembling slightly with anticipation. It was a detailed drawing of a woman standing by a window, gazing out at a storm. The lines were sharp, the shading was perfect, and the emotion in the drawing was palpable. "Mia, this is incredible," I said, genuinely awestruck. "You've really outdone yourself this time." She smiled shyly, looking down at the ground. "I'm nervous. What if they don't like it?" "Don't worry about that," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What matters is that you're proud of it, and I'm proud of you." Her smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw that spark of confidence in her eyes, the same spark that had been buried under so much pain and loss. She was starting to believe in herself again, and it felt like a victory for both of us. The art show came and went, and Mia's piece was well received. I watched her from the sidelines as she spoke to her classmates, explaining the inspiration behind her drawing. She was growing into herself, piece by piece, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that she was finding her way. But even with all the progress, there were still tough days. Days when the grief would hit her harder than usual, and she would retreat into her room, not wanting to talk. On those days, I would give her space, but I never stopped checking in. I'd knock softly on her door and ask if she needed anything. Sometimes she'd say no, and sometimes she'd just shake her head, but I knew that the simple act of being there, of showing her that I wasn't going anywhere, meant something. One evening, as we were watching a movie together, Mia turned to me, her face serious. Grandpa, do you think I'll ever be okay? I paused, the question taking me by surprise. In all the time we'd spent together, she'd never asked me that directly. She had never voiced the uncertainty that I knew was still inside her. You're already doing okay? I said softly, meeting her gaze. You've been through so much, Mia, but I see you, every day trying. And that's what matters. You'll get there, one step at a time, and you won't be alone when you do. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't seen in a while. Hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. The truth was, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know exactly what the future held for us or how long it would take for Mia to fully heal from everything she had lost. But I knew one thing for sure. We would face it together. We had come so far, and as long as we had each other, I believed we could handle whatever came our way. As the weeks passed, Mia and I found a new rhythm. She was starting to share more with me, stories about school, her friends, the things that mattered to her. And though the grief was still there, it wasn't as heavy as it had been. It was lighter, more manageable. We were healing, slowly but surely. And that, in itself, felt like a miracle. A year had passed since Mia moved in with me, and in that time, I had watched her transform in ways I hadn't thought possible. She wasn't the same quiet, withdrawn girl who had arrived on my doorstep, burdened with grief and confusion. No, she had become someone else, a stronger version of herself, still tender and vulnerable, but learning to navigate the world in her own way. The change was subtle at first. Small things I noticed when I paid close attention. Mia started to share more with me, not just about her day, but about her thoughts and dreams. She had joined a local art class, and though it was something I never expected her to do, she thrived there. Her artwork was no longer just an escape. It was a way for her to express herself, to say things that words sometimes couldn't capture. I found myself looking at her one evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, sketching away with her usual focus. I had made dinner, something simple, like we used to do when Jason was young, a dish he always loved, and she'd come downstairs, asked if she could help. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to me. She didn't want to be alone in her room anymore. She was starting to engage with the world again, and I couldn't have been prouder. "How's the drawing going?" I asked, setting the plates down in front of her. She paused, glanced up from her sketchbook, and smiled, a real unguarded smile. "It's good," she said. "I'm doing a piece for a local exhibit. I don't know if it will get accepted, but I want to try." I sat across from her, my heart swelling with pride. "That's amazing, Mia. I'm sure it's going to be great. You've got a gift." Her smile widened at the compliment, and she sat back, stretching her arms over her head. "Thanks. I think it's the first time I felt excited about something in a long time." We ate dinner together, and it was a simple, quiet moment. But there was so much in it, so much meaning in the way we shared that space, that meal. There were no heavy silences, no awkward pauses, just the two of us, together, sharing what had become our new normal. Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching an old movie, Mia leaned her head on my shoulder. She had done this before, but this time it felt different. Less about seeking comfort and more about simply being close. Her trust in me, in us, had grown in ways I hadn't expected. And in that moment, I realized that she had stopped seeing me as the man who was just filling in after her mother's death. She had started to see me as her family, her grandfather, and someone she could rely on. "I miss her," Mia said quietly, almost to herself. "I know, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I miss her too. And it's okay to miss her. We always will. But we're here now, and we've got each other." She nodded, her eyes soft, and for the first time, I saw a hint of peace in her expression. She was no longer the broken girl who had stepped into this house, unsure of what her future held. She was beginning to see the possibility of that future, one that was filled with love, not just loss. As I watched her slowly drift off to sleep that night, her head resting against my shoulder, I thought about how far we had come, how much we had both healed in the quiet, everyday moments. It wasn't always easy, and there were still hard days ahead, but I was beginning to understand something important. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to carry it with you, while also allowing yourself to move forward. Mia and I were doing just that. moving forward, together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Life often throws unexpected challenges our way, and it's easy to feel lost or uncertain when things change. My advice is to embrace the journey, even when it feels uncomfortable. Healing takes time, and it's okay to feel vulnerable. Surround yourself with those who care about you, and remember that you don't have to face life's difficulties alone. Be patient with yourself and others. Trust the process and allow room for growth. Sometimes, the most unexpected relationships can bring the greatest healing, teaching you that it's never too late to start anew and find purpose.